folks, Roland Martin here, broadcasting live from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where I'll be addressing black educators tomorrow morning. But coming up today on Roland Martin Unfiltered for Thursday, March 21st, 2019, the Atlanta mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, announces a major investigation reopening the Atlanta child murders. Of course, it took place between 1979 and 1981, leaving 29 children dead. No one was ever convicted for those crimes. Keisha Lance Bottoms will join us right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Folks, remember the wrestler forced to cut his dreadlocks or forfeit his match? But new details on how the referee and the school district tried to calm the furor after the video went viral. The reporter who dug deep into this story will join us live. All that banging on CNN for its lack of black executive diversity is paying off in a small way. Jeff Zucker will be facing a new sheriff in town with a mandate to fix the diversity problem. We'll explain to you what that means. Thousands of Liberian immigrants face deportation if the Trump administration does not act in the next 10 days. We'll tell you exactly what's going on with an attorney for the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under law. And also, should Joe Biden pick Stacey Abrams to be his VP choice as soon as he announces a run for president? Or is she just a prop? We'll break it down with our panel. Plus, I've got one of my special breakdowns on history, y'all, when it comes to Laura Ingraham. Y'all, you cannot believe the conversation that she had on her Fox News show. Class will be in session again. And Jordan Peele's new horror movie opens tomorrow. We'll hear from one of the stars, Lupita Nyong'o. Folks, it is time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
Atlanta and the nation was shocked and stunned in 1979 through 1981 when 29 black children kept coming up dead in that city. Now, the police blamed a black man, Wayne Williams, for most of those murders. He was arrested and convicted for the murder of two unrelated adults. Now, no one has been charged in any of the 29 children's death, but as a result of a new documentary that is coming out drawing attention to the Atlanta child murders, Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms announced today that the cases will be reopened using new forensic technology that may point to a definite killer or killers. Now, in previous conversations, of course, the police commissioner at that time, Lee Brown, he said that no doubt Wayne Williams was indeed the killer, because he said as soon as Wayne Williams was convicted, all of the killings stopped. Joining us right now is the mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms. Mayor, welcome to Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Thank you for having me.
So obviously this documentary that Will Packer is working on with the mother of one of the victims is renewing the focus. He was on the Breakfast Club this morning. He announced that you would be doing this as well. But what specifically? Was it the documentary or was it something else that precipitated you saying we need to reopen and try to use new technology to figure out the killer of those 29 children?
Roland, it really was a combination of things. I think for me, having been 9 years old when these killings began, it very much was a part of my childhood and the backdrop of my childhood. But being the mayor of this city and now having 4 children of my own, ages 8 to 16, it resonates with me in such a very different way. And certainly bringing attention to the killings through Will's documentary, through some of our digital partners who we know have had podcasts and social media discussions on it, have certainly helped elevate the conversation. But for me, coming in as mayor of Atlanta, it is something that I always personally wondered, was there information available that I would now be privy to as mayor that I was not as a layperson? And so when I had a conversation about Will, I saw Curtis Walker's mother, Mrs. Leach, interviewed, and she talked about there not being any memorial and really feeling like her son had been forgotten. That part was easy because I knew that at the very least we could offer some type of lasting memorial for these children. So I announced that last week during my State of the City. But then last week when I saw that 2 cold cases in Alabama had been solved, I believe these young women were murdered in 1999 based on DNA evidence that had been put into a national database. I immediately called my police chief, Erica Shields, and asked her, had we tried to upload any evidence that we might have into the national databases? There had been a look at these cases a few years ago, but we know with having public DNA databases now, that perhaps there's something else that we can do and some other connections that we can make. So we don't know what we still have available to be tested, but we know with DNA, all you need is 1 drop. And I even asked Chief Shields today if, and I don't know the answer to this, and she didn't answer offhand, is it a way that we can go back and even perhaps look at some of the children's bodies and see if we tested under their fingernails or would there be any evidence after they've been buried that may still be available to us? So I know that when, people are buried, the bodies are cleansed, et cetera. I don't know the answer, but what I shared with Mrs. Leach today is it is important to me that history say that we tried. So we will go back, look at all of the evidence that we have, that the Georgia Bureau of Investigations has. Hopefully the FBI still has evidence, our neighboring jurisdiction, DeKalb County, and we'll see what's available. And we will certainly do everything that we can to at least provide some peace to these families, if at all possible.
Obviously, this was perplexing for then Mayor Maynard Jackson because in reading the biography about him, it was just shocking for him every day to come to the work. And when his police commissioner walk in would say, "Don't tell me they found another one." Folks were shocked. Folks were stunned. Yet in previous documentaries, Lee Brown, who was then police commissioner, he said that without a doubt, Wayne Williams was the man behind these crimes because all of the murders stopped as soon as Wayne Williams was arrested. But is it for you is the issue the fact that Williams was not convicted of any of these crimes, and that for many of these family members, it is still unsettling that although he's in prison, that they didn't get any sort of closure by specifically saying he was responsible or someone else was responsible for their child's death?
Well, Roland, you know that I've been a lawyer for a long time and I was a judge for many years. So I do understand that there's a process and sometimes prosecutors make certain decisions as to what they will prosecute and what they won't. The interesting thing that I think has always really struck people in Atlanta, when you look at profiles of serial killers, is that the murders that Wayne Williams was actually charged with were murders of much older young men. And the vast majority of these victims were children. And something that I learned that I didn't even know, one body has still never been found. And there were 3 that were not definitively linked to Wayne Williams. So I think that people differ. I think the professionals differ. And I know that people in the community differ. Many people don't believe that Wayne Williams killed all of these victims. I don't know the answer to that. But what I do know is that he was not charged with all of the murders, that there are still families out there who don't believe that he was responsible. And we owe it to these children, to the legacy of these children. And again, I go back to, I was 9. And right. I lived through this, and to now stand as mayor of Atlanta, we owe it to do all that we can do to say that if there are answers to be had, then we won't stop until we get those answers. And if we go through all of the evidence and there's nothing else to be found, then we can at least look these families in the eyes and say that we tried. But we will have a memorial in this city and find the appropriate way to honor these families and these children. And to hear Mrs. Leach say that she finally feels heard, for me, was extremely fulfilling. And I'm just grateful that we can at least provide that comfort to her.
It is stunning that after all of these years, there is no memorial in Atlanta for these 29 children. Of course, in 1979, when this started, I was 11 years old, and I can tell you it reverberated in black communities all across this country. Black parents were constantly checking on their children because of what was happening in Atlanta, because there was fear that it could somehow spread to other cities as well. And so what's your timeline for this memorial in terms of when it will commence and be completed?
We are getting to work on that immediately, and Will Packer has already agreed to do whatever he can do to help us facilitate that. But most importantly, we want input from the families as to what they would think would be appropriate. And, you know, if you can imagine this today, I remember Roland, my grandmother and my aunt calling from Chicago, begging my mother to send me to Chicago to live because they were killing black children in Atlanta. And it is something, I think what's really struck me is how emotional it's made me 40 years later, because what I realized is that I processed all of this as a child living through it. And for us in Atlanta, our biggest fears came true. There was a boogeyman in our lives, but processing it and looking at it from the lens of a mother with children of this age, I cannot begin to imagine what that pain must be. So I think a memorial is the very least that we can do, and we should have done many, many years ago.
All right. Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, we certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, folks, so y'all might remember this video of the young black New Jersey wrestler being forced to cut his dreadlocks or forfeit his match. Check this out. Now, the white ref said no to wearing a cap as the wrestler Andrew Johnson had done the week before. Now, he ended up winning the match, but you can see how upset he was about the forced haircut. The referee, Alan Maloney, announced this week he is suing because he suffered emotional distress from the well-deserved backlash. What the hell is that? Joining us now is Melanie Burney, a reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer, who has dug deep into this story. Melanie, welcome to Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hello, Roland, and thanks for having me.
So I'm curious, how all of a sudden is he the one who was emotionally impacted by this when it was his action that caused the furor all across the country? And then we found out about his history as well, using racial language previously.
That's the million-dollar question that everyone has. And it will be interesting to see how it plays out, because he was the person who initiated this. And a lot of the backlash and the feedback that we've received from readers and viewers has been, it seems that the wrestler, Andrew Johnson, is the victim here. So that's the question that we'll be waiting to see. If he actually files a lawsuit, what will be the grounds?
And so as you begin to look into this, what did you uncover?
Well, this story has really struck a nerve across the region and across the country. As you mentioned, the video went viral. So I have been following this story since it first broke in December, because I too have been fascinated by it. And what we found is that there seems to be a lot of conversation about what the rules are. And as this investigation goes forward, I think a lot of the attention will focus on what are the rules. Have they been fairly applied, or have they been misinterpreted? So we are waiting to hear what the Athletic Association says and what the Rules Committee will, how they will weigh in on this.
And obviously, this ref, he wants this to focus on him. But how is the young man doing? Has he or his family filed lawsuits, spoken out, or done anything as a result of this?
They have not taken any legal action. And I think what people have to remember is that he's a 16-year-old kid who loves wrestling, and that's all he wanted to do was the opportunity to wrestle. So from speaking with his attorney, he's doing very well. All things considered, he finished the season on a high note. He made it to the regional tournament, and he's going back to just being an ordinary 16-year-old kid. He doesn't want the media spotlight, so he has declined our request for interviews. And I think they just want all of this to be settled and resolved. And I can tell you that his attorney told me that he wants to wrestle again next season. He and his little brother, they want to come back next season and hopefully have no controversy, no incidents, and just be a normal kid.
All right, Melanie, Bernie, we surely appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
All right, folks, let's talk about these two stories with my panel. And we're there in Washington, D.C. Dr. Greg Carr is the chair of the Department of Afro-American Studies at Howard University. Also, Kelly Bethea, a communication strategist, and Joseph Williams, senior editor, U.S. News and World Report. Greg, I want to start with you first. Let's talk about the Atlanta case. The fact that the mayor is reopening this to utilize the new technology. Still so many questions from parents about what happened to their children. 29 black kids dead, and no one ever convicted specifically for their murders.
Roland, I think near the end of the interview, you put it well when you asked the question about the fact that there's not been a monument. I'm drawn back to two of our most powerful writers and thinkers of the last century. The great Tony K. Bombara, who wrote the book These Bones Are Not My Child, about a fictional account of Atlanta child murders. And of course, the great James Baldwin, who wrote the book The Evidence of Things Not Seen. In both of those books, they conveyed a sense of how terrifying it was and is to be a black child in America. I was in 9th grade when Jeannie Scott, our black civics teacher at Hillsborough High School in Nashville, was wearing a ribbon, and she said, "I'm concerned about my children." What Mayor Lance Bottoms is doing, and along with police chief and everyone else, what they're doing is giving us a form of not only closure, but elevating those children to our common humanity. And that may be the most important thing of all. And I'm glad to hear our frat brothers involved, our dear brother, Brother Will Packer.
Kelly, obviously this is a huge deal here because it is still a stain on the city of Atlanta. Maynard Jackson, of course, was the first black mayor of that particular city. It was a painful, painful time for him dealing with that as well. And again, when you read biographies about him, he was utterly helpless as child after child. I mean, this was 2 years of terror that reigned over Atlanta.
I can only speak on behalf of my generation. I was not alive at that time, but I can only imagine the fear that my mother would have had, or that my father would have had, my grandparents would have had, because that's just something that you're not supposed to even fathom. You're not supposed to imagine that in your home, in your city. And the closest thing I can recall that's even close to something that tragic was the sniper shootings in D.C. at the time, where you couldn't do anything. Any white van that you saw was just a target and something to be feared. We didn't have recess. We didn't have any type of after-school activities at that time. And it was terrifying as a child. I can only imagine what it was like for the parents, and for the mayor of Atlanta now, who's already breaking ground in so many other areas in that city. For her to be taking on this initiative as well is definitely something that is to be applauded.
Joseph, I'm going to link this story also with a young man in New Jersey. Obviously, on one hand, you got 29 kids who were murdered, and you talk about terrorizing. But I'm also use the word terrorizing for what took place with the wrestler in New Jersey. And the reality is what we are experiencing is that black people are consistently being terrorized in this country. Here is a young man who's wrestling, and all of a sudden a cap wasn't sufficient. No, you must cut your dreadlocks. In essence, changing who you are and the essence of who you are because this white referee said, I'm in charge. Either you do this or you forfeit. And the problem that we have is black children are consistently being traumatized, whether you talk about crime in communities, killings, gunshots, but also even in this case where he can't even wrestle because of his hair.
Well, and ultimately the white man becomes the victim. I mean, that's kind of the punchline at the end of the really bitter joke here, is that the white guy figures that he's the one who's really been wronged here when he was just trying to preserve order. And they're all of a piece, right? I mean, they're all of a piece about young African Americans who are dehumanized in a certain way and whose bodies are deemed disposable in the case of the Atlanta child murders, and whose self-expression is being repressed in the case of the wrestler. Now, certainly, yes, he's a young man who's got his future ahead of him. He is going to go on, no doubt, to great things in being able to withstand this kind of scrutiny and that kind of trauma. But it is trauma, and that's the thing that a lot of people are forgetting. You mentioned yourself about how dejected his body language spoke. He was hunched over. Even though he won, he was not elated. He took one for the team. And that particular story, I'd like to know what was going through the coach's mind, why he didn't say, you know what, timeout, we're walking as a unit. Our man has been called upon to make a sacrifice that nobody else here is. We walk out of this match under protest. That didn't seem to happen, judging by the accounts. And in the case of the Atlanta child's murder, it's so amazing that all of us, save for Kelly, remember where we were. I was 17 years old in Chattanooga, Tennessee, when this was all going on, and it was a monumental event in the lives of African Americans at that time. And that's how much power it had. That's how much power is going to be. How much energy, negative energy, is going to be released in simply opening up this case again.
To Greg, Joseph used the word disposable in describing our children. And the reality is, when we examine the last 399 and a half years of people of African descent being in this country, that really has been the case. Look, we still are covering the other day, the mother of Amber Evans, the young woman missing in Columbus, Ohio. Is her story getting national attention? Absolutely not. You mean to tell me that if a white female activist all of a sudden comes up missing in Columbus, Ohio, that the cable networks are going to ignore her story? I don't think so. And so we see this all the time. White woman, white girl comes up missing, massive coverage. Black girl, black boy comes up missing, nothing at all. And so we still are living in a society where black bodies are meaninless, are nothing, and you don't have this righteous anger. And then if we do get upset, then it's, oh, how dare you? Why are you so upset? And in the case of this referee, oh, I'm now the victim. I was hurt because what y'all said about me.
This country will never know peace until our common humanity is established as a matter of law and as a matter of custom. It was very powerful to see the press conference today and Catherine Leach stand there, and Mayor Lance Bottoms kept referring back to her. It's very important to see these black women, a mayor of a major American city, and this black woman whose child was killed and who doesn't know peace. And to have those sisters step in the breach and intervene, and think about the scholar Wilma King, who has written about slavery during childhood, reinforcing the fact that black bodies were not seen as human, and the bodies of black children were seen as even more valuable as commodities. Children eating out the slop trough with the hogs. Children who are basically bartered and sold. Coming into the 19th, 20th century, cartoons where black children are always being threatened by alligators or swallowed by animals, or the 10 little ends coming after 10 little Indians. In other words, these are little children. They're not children. They're little playthings. So to see Mayor Lance Bottoms, and to see that sister and just have her keep referring back to her, reinforces the fact that I don't care how many white men or white women or anybody else goes to court and say that they were threatened. Our lives are only as valuable in this society as we make them. And if the price needs to be too dear for somebody to pay to attack us, then let that price be too dear.
And Kelly, this is why I don't care what generation we're talking about. We must follow exactly what Frederick Douglass said, and that is agitate, 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 and the power concedes nothing without a demand, never has and never will.
Absolutely. There has never been a situation that I've read, that I've been taught, where true change happened through just peace. Something always had to be agitated. Something always had to be interrupted in order for anything positive to happen. And when that happens, it's not necessarily all positive. Sometimes it requires violence. Sometimes it requires protest. Sometimes it requires you being uncomfortable in order to get comfortable afterwards. So it needs to be a situation, it needs to be some type of movement in which we need to be okay with being uncomfortable, at least for a time, so that the change that we need, the change that we, quite frankly, demand and deserve can come to place.
But see, it was
very interesting. Joseph, real quick, go ahead.
Okay, I was just saying, you know, 'twas ever thus, though, right? I mean, and even now we're hearing talk about civility. Why aren't our politics more civil? Why can't we talk to one another like we used to? Well, when we talk to one another like we used to, that was a form of subservience if you were a black person. So I don't think that civility is the answer here, and people keep calling for it. I think it's a reaction to what's going on outside of those certain halls of privilege.
Well, it's very interesting when you talk about the notion of civility, and also how black folks have to understand that we've got to be willing to also challenge folks. I had lots of people who on my Facebook page who were saying, why are you making a big deal out of there being no black executives at CNN? And then, of course, you had the black folks, Greg, who were saying, why is it that we just don't start our own, as if we actually haven't done that? But I keep saying, why can't we do both? Well, folks, a couple hours ago, this story dropped where the head of Warner Media, AT&T, of course, is the parent company. They bought Time Warner, so they merged, and so it's called Warner Media. He announced a chief diversity officer is going to be hired. John Stankey said that chief diversity officer is going to report directly to him. He said there was a town hall where he attended, where he was questioned about the issue of diversity and inclusion, and he said it absolutely matters. Now, also was very interesting, the Los Angeles Times, first of all, reported this story, and he sent out a letter, and I'm going to read for you a quote here that I found to be very interesting in the quote. Stankey said on Thursday that Warner Media has recently implemented a new talent review and management process designed to identify and promote emerging talent within the company. Joseph, I don't think there's any shock that all of a sudden this position is being created after the National Association of Black Journalists has blasted CNN President Jeff Zucker for no black executive producers, no black vice presidents, no black executive vice presidents, no black senior vice presidents, and no black direct reports. And not only that, we have demanded a civil rights audit of the company as well be examined to look at these very issues. And so, although other media out there may not want to give NABJ credit, because we've been joined by the NAACP, the Congressional Black Caucus, NNPA, Reverend Jackson, Alpha Phi Alpha, we've been joined by so many other groups as well. They are responding to pressure, and this is why I need the black people out there who are listening to shut the hell up and stop acting as if we cannot make demands on a system when we are the ones who are watching, and we are the ones who are also making this possible. Joseph.
It matters. I mean, it matters. Diversity matters. It matters in coverage of presidential campaigns. Somebody could argue, and probably credibly will, in a paper or study somewhere, that CNN had a very large hand in helping elect our current president by airing his rallies unfiltered, by not really critically questioning him, and by letting a lot of stuff go by. So it absolutely matters. The one thing that I want to question, however, is whether or not the diversity executive is going to get the kind of power that he or she needs to make real change happen. I mean, we've seen it over and over again where these companies hire diversity. Google was one where they hired a diversity executive, and that person was rendered basically toothless because the system was not invested in change. So that's number one. Number two, there should not be any discussion about why NABJ matters or not, because it absolutely does. Without their calling CNN out, without them spearheading this particular aspect of their coverage, we wouldn't have the kind of progress that we have today. And we need this to keep happening. NABJ matters. Join your chapter, go to the convention, do whatever you need to do to get behind the organization.
Greg Carr, let me be real clear for the folks who don't understand. NABJ is not going, yay, they're hiring a chief diversity officer. We still want to see those black executives. So we are acknowledging this, but we're actually preparing a statement that we're going to be sending out very soon, making it perfectly clear that we are not relenting in our call for black executives, and we still expect to schedule a meeting with AT&T CEO Randall Stevenson, since Jeff Zucker doesn't have the courage to sit down with NABJ because he doesn't want me at the table.
Well, I mean, one thing is for sure, if history has shown us nothing else, it is when the black press acts in unison and black folks support the black press, the non-black press has to respond. That has been true. I mean, you've talked many times on this show about our brother Gerald Horne's book on the rise of the Associated Negro Press. And what we see in NABJ over the decades of its existence is a relentless pursuit of telling our people's stories. And of course, the last thing I say is right here in this venue, you didn't wait. And, you know, it's very popular now to talk about walking and chewing gum at the same time. This is a black venue. The story tonight about what was happening in Atlanta, the conversation about this brother they cut his locks, that story in Jersey, it's not going to be on CNN or MSNBC or any other places. But the fact that it is here and that it's in the black press and it's all over the country and now through the internet, what that means is CNN, if they want to stay relevant, they will eventually have to have that meeting, and then you can, you know, chuckle as Zucker comes in the table and has to deal with you.
And Kelly, here's the piece. In Dr. King's book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, he called on 4 institutions in the black community to do what they are required to advance the cause of black people. And one of those was the black press. And he specifically wrote that the black press must be militant in advocating on behalf of black people. And Kelly, there are a lot of folks, and again, this is not specific to your generation, because there are people who are Gen X, there are people who are baby boomers, who all know y'all shouldn't be sitting here saying nothing. Why are you making all this noise? But I believe that this generation must understand that they must also be as aggressive in demanding changes and demanding a seat at the table. And the people out there who say, oh, why y'all begging white folks for jobs? Let me just go ahead and educate y'all that there are 2.6 million black-owned businesses in America. 2.5 million of those black-owned businesses have 1 employee. That means out of the 2.6 million black-owned businesses in America, only 100,000 have more than 1 employee. So the reality is black people in America are likely going to be working for white people. So to act as if that, oh no, y'all should just stop and create your own, that's not the reality. And the people who also are yelling, create your own, this is a black show that we're creating our own, but how many of y'all are willing to support? Kelly, your comment before we move to our next story.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think a major problem with my generation, the millennials in general, is that we have gotten complacent with the rights that we have because we've seen what our parents and grandparents had to deal with. We have voting rights, so we don't have to fight for that, quote unquote. Well, now we do, but eventually, like beforehand, we didn't. We have housing, we have voting, we have all these rights that our parents and grandparents fought for, and we feel like everything's okay right now. And the problem is, it's not. Just because you have basic rights doesn't mean you can't take a step forward and a step above and get even more rights and even more privileges that our white counterparts were practically born with. So, like you said, only 100,000 black-owned businesses can actually hire someone like me. If I'm not in that area, then I'm out of luck. So white people have to hire me. Who else is going to? And millennials have to understand that not everybody can be an entrepreneur, where everything can't be instant. We can't all be Instagram influencers and Facebook watch people and all these things. Like, we have to have a consumer in order to be an entrepreneur in the first place. We have to have somebody to buy the product. We have to have somebody to actually do business with. So millennials have to understand that we can't just be complacent where we are. We have to keep going forward and getting the things that we frankly deserve.
All right, then, of course, folks, you can always support Roland Martin Unfiltered by joining our Bring the Funk fan club. And, of course, go by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. And then all the folks, of course, who are watching YouTube right now, you can also actually contribute right now, right there on the page. I already see some folks who have, and I certainly appreciate AFAB for doing so. And so anybody, of course, I'll say this here, who contributes literally during this live broadcast on YouTube, I'll definitely give you a shout out while you're doing so. As I keep telling you, we've got to fund our own freedom. And the reason we have organizations like NABJ, we are there to fight for black journalists. The B in NABJ stands for black. And so we're not going to relent. We're not going to back off. And so CNN has to understand we're not going away. We met with ABC on Monday. We met with NBC last Friday. We're scheduling meetings with digital companies. I've got an email today from a newspaper company out of the Southwest where they have some 200 employees, and they've got 20 executives and not a single African American. Trust me, they too will be getting a phone call. This is what Dr. King told us to do. We must do it. And it's always been the case for black folks, standing up and fighting for ourselves. That's what we are supposed to do. Going to a break. We'll be back on Roland Martin Unfiltered in a moment. You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it.
Until I became independent and they start messing with my money, then I really cared. What's really going on? Too much that is endangering us, from the food that we eat to the air that we breathe. They are killing us. The climate of our nation now, with Trump just running his mouth and saying senseless things and crazy things, and it was like, and I often now think, who is our voice? You have to have something that has taken place that you care about, if it stands for. Someone play devil's advocate. But if you put someone up there that don't look like I do and don't sound the way that I sound and can break it down to me, I'm not listening. And my mother said, girl, don't be no damn fool. But it wasn't until Obama got into office till I really started being more educated about the process and how my voice is really heard through my vote. Now, everybody wants things to be easy. We've had a hardship for a long time. If we allow things to be fun, maybe we can get more people on board with it.
Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered, the blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play. Foreign-born immigrants from Africa and the Caribbean make up about 10% of the black population in America. Some are legal permanent residents, some here on work visas, and some are here as refugees. And some can be deported if the Trump administration decides to send them back to where they came from. There are thousands of Liberians here as a result of a brutal civil war that killed 250,000 people between 1989 and 2003. They are at risk of being deported starting at the end of the month. Here to explain this is Miriam Jordan, Associate Counsel of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under Law. Now, Miriam, you are representing a woman. She has been, of course, speaking out. So for the folks at home who don't quite understand, and let's be real clear, you got some black folks out there who are flat out against immigration. They think it's Latinos. They're saying, oh, this hurts black people. But these are people, these are black people, these are people of African descent who could very well been living here for years, who the Trump folks want to simply ship out of the country.
Exactly, and thank you for pointing out this important issue. I think when we discuss immigration policies here in the United States, it's important to make sure that Black immigrants are part of the narrative. I think that given our current climate, it is common for these immigrants to be ignored. And getting back to the DED point, Liberians have been here for roughly 30 years because of armed conflict in their country and the Ebola virus outbreak, and they've received humanitarian parole. And one form of this relief is called Deferred Enforced Departure, or DED, which allows these immigrants to live here lawfully and get work authorization. And I think currently there's about 4,000 Liberians who are benefiting from DED throughout the United States, and they've developed strong ties here. They are homeowners, they have attended universities, they have U.S. citizen children. And the fact that this program is ending, even though it's been supported by 3 different administrations across the party line, it's very concerning. And starting at the end of this month, if the end of DED moves forward as Trump intends, these Liberians could be subjected to deportation and forced to abandon their homes and their jobs and their families here.
And what you have here, you have an administration that has consistently targeted immigrants, especially Black immigrants. Trump made his shithole comment, and they do not want to see folks from Liberia, from Sudan, from Haiti, from other African nations. I mean, this is very targeted by this administration.
Yes, exactly. And so my organization, as well as Pro Bono Council and our Boston affiliate, have filed this lawsuit challenging the end of DED because, in part, this decision was made because of Trump's racist attitudes towards immigrants of color, especially Black immigrants. And the end of the DED program is just part of the program, or the pattern of immigration policies that have, unfortunately, solely affected immigrants of color. And when you think about all of these statements that President Trump has said before and during his presidency, it's very clear that he has these negative attitudes, spanning from insulting statements about Mexican immigrants, what he said about Central American countries, of course, what he's said about African countries and them being asshole nations. And so I think it's really important to, for this lawsuit to capture what is really happening here, and it's that there is racist attitudes towards immigrants of color, and that President Trump has documented statements indicating that he prefers white or European immigrants to come here instead. It's been documented, he questioned why we don't have more immigrants from countries such as Norway. And so, all of these hurtful comments just show what is at play here, and that racism is playing a huge role in these immigration policies that can harm thousands of people, including thousands of Liberians who will lose their DED status at the end of the month.
Greg Carr, you've got, again, you got Black folks out here who are sounding like MAGA supporters, trashing Black immigrants and saying, oh, ship them home, ship them home. But this, to me, is illogical, and this is clearly targeting people who look like us.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a silly-minded argument to make. As the Republican Party has shifted to become the party of white supremacy, we trace this back in the post-Reagan era to George W. Bush, in fact, who moved the Liberians off of temporary protected status and put this DED thing in play in the first place, to have it renewed every year and a half or so. The Republican Party has increasingly become a party of white supremacy, and so to our friends and family out there who would make a distinction between Africans anywhere in the world, please be reminded that our open enemies aren't making that distinction. And so when they're not making that distinction, we have to move, as Stephen Horford out of Nevada did. I'm thinking about Yvette Clarke in New York. There are many immigrant populations of African people in this country, from the Caribbean, from Latin America, all over Africa, French-speaking Africa, English-speaking Africa. And these Liberians, I remember when the first wave came when I was in college. When you go from Samuel Doe to Prince Johnson and Charles Taylor, all the way up through Ellen Sirleaf Johnson and now George Weah. Liberia, as it's working to get its act together, America has no problem dropping AFRICOM, all Africa, and chasing terrorism and trying to take natural resources. Damn it, we need to stand up and fight for our family wherever they are in the world. And at this moment, that means keeping these Liberian folks in our family here in the United States of America.
Miriam, what do you want us to do? What do you want the people watching to do?
So I think there's many different ways to target this upcoming end of the DED program. So aside from our lawsuit, there's also the possibility of a legislative fix. And so I think it's really important to urge members of Congress to support legislation that will create a pathway towards permanent residency and citizenship for these Liberian DED holders. And it's really important to understand that DED has benefited immigrants from other countries, and when their status was ending, Congress in the past had found ways to pass legislation that created a pathway towards permanent residency. And I think that given this pattern, I don't see why this Congress can't do the same for Liberian DED holders.
All right, Miriam Jordan with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. And anytime Kristen is here, I always tell her she has to make the appeal for folks to support the work that y'all do. So for folks who want to support the Lawyers Committee, what's the website to go to?
LawyersCommittee.org.
All right. Always ask for money, Miriam. Always ask for money.
I'll remember that. Thank you.
Very much. Always ask for money. All right. Going to a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about this white racist DA in Mississippi who is running unopposed. Makes no sense. Stacey Abrams, could she be on the ticket with Joe Biden? And, we got to have a little history lesson for Laura Ingraham and, of course, a clueless guest on Fox News who had no understanding about the Civil War and the Constitution and American history. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. Back in a moment.
Life is what your creator gave you for free. Style is what you do with it. Astronaut Mae Jemison.
All right, folks, HBCU Giving Day. North Carolina Central University is our school of the day. Founded in 1910, located in Durham, North Carolina. Notable graduates include Julius Chambers, Willie E. Gary, Maynard Jackson, and many more. If you want to support North Carolina Central, go to nccu.edu. First of all, y'all have Willie Gary? No, he went to Shaw. He didn't go to North Carolina Central. Unless he went to both schools, but no, he graduated from Shaw. So anyway, go to nccu.edu, nccu.edu, and also congrats to them. They also made March Madness, lost, of course, in the first four, but shout out to the basketball team for advancing. All right, folks, now calling on HBCU alumni, students, and leaders enter the Ford Motor Company HBCU Mobility Challenge, and you can win $25,000 for your school. Building on their long-term support of HBCUs, Ford is looking to improve mobility in HBCU communities through innovative solutions. The winning program will receive a grant of up to $25,000 to implement the proposal. The deadline to apply is March 31st, 2019. Go to FGB.Life for more information and to apply. Ford goes further in our community, and we certainly thank them for being a partner here at Roland Martin Unfiltered. All right, folks, we tell you all the time why it's important for us to be involved in all elections. Yesterday, we told you about the Supreme Court looking at the case of this DA in Mississippi named Doug Evans, a white prosecutor who tried the same man 6 times for murder until he got a conviction. He kept 41 out of a possible 42 black jurors off of the case. The Supreme Court heard oral arguments of this case of blatant discrimination. Today, we learned that the prosecutor will serve 4 more years because no one filed to run against him by the March 1st deadline. Folks, this is why we cannot ignore races like District Attorney. You look at what is taking place in Philadelphia, in Baltimore, what is taking place in cities all across the country when you have DAs of conscience who understand the importance of mass incarceration, then they are able to make changes. And even if this guy, being white in Mississippi, would win, he should always have an opponent. Also, something real quick, Clarence Thomas yesterday, he asked his first question in 3 years regarding this case. Oh my God, this is a doozy. So when they were talking in the round of questioning, he asked the plaintiff in the case, did the defense strike any black jurors, or did they use race to strike anyone from the jury? And she said, well, yeah, we struck white jurors from the jury pool. He was somehow trying to make a point. Then, of course, Sister Sonia Sotomayor, she jumped in and said, I'm sorry, you only struck white jurors because the DA had already gotten rid of all the black people. So there was nobody left for you to strike other than white jurors. And she said, yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's what happens when you got Clarence Thomas on the damn Supreme Court. Okay. All right, folks, Stacey Abrams, of course, she lost her bid for governor of Georgia. Could she be the vice presidential running mate for Joe Biden? Well, Axios is reporting that the Biden camp is literally debating this very issue as to whether or not they will announce her as his VP pick to somehow have a unity ticket. Now, normally what happens is the person secures a nomination first, and then they pick their vice president nominee before the Democratic convention. Well, Biden is looking at something quite different. The question for our panel is your thoughts on this. Kelly, I want to start with you. Again, quite untraditional. It could throw people. Biden met with her. It was at his insistence for lunch a couple of weeks ago. What are your thoughts about this possibly happening?
I like it. To be frank, the fact that they're planning this far ahead and actually trying to get something, concrete together, I think would be best especially for the Biden team, because he's almost coming in as an incumbent. He's kind of coming in as Obama 2.0, so to speak. At least that's how people are going to market him. So for him to just have all his ducks in a row and all of his, T's crossed and I's dotted, especially when it comes to a VP pick, I think that's commendable of him. One of the critiques that I heard regarding this matter is, well, when he's on for the debates itself, when the question arises, if you're chosen as the presidential nominee, how come you wouldn't pick one of these people to be your VP? And I think that, frankly, by the time we get to that point, we're going to have enough fodder for each and every one of those picks for him to make a justifiable argument as to why they shouldn't be VP and why Abrams should be VP.
Joseph, I'm going to go to you. First of all, I understand the dance here. To me, I don't think it's a smart move. It has nothing to do with Stacey Abrams. What it has to do with is, I believe, first of all, Biden is not guaranteed to win the nomination. And I believe that you actually have to take all the folks through baptism by fire. Stacey Abrams also could announce she's going to run for president. So unless she's giving him some kind of indication, that's also out there as well. I just think if you're Biden, you better focus on you. You better focus on you trying to get the nomination, as opposed to thinking, well, if I go ahead and pick her, that might help me get the nomination. I just think that I wouldn't necessarily support the move. Joseph, your thoughts?
Well, it's got a couple of downsides. The first is Stacey Abrams can make her own decision. I mean, she doesn't necessarily need Joe Biden to be her queen maker, if you will. Secondly, it's kind of it has a little whiff of pandering to it, to the black community. It also seems like, the third point is, it seems like he's trying to offload some baggage that he's got, number one, with the Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill hearing, where he didn't comport himself all that well with a black woman who was under fire. And second, the fact that he's an old white guy, which, I have to say, I do admire Joe Biden. I think he's got really good political skills. He was part of the winning ticket. But the optics really aren't that great for white guys this year in the Democratic nomination. So I think he's trying to help himself. But also, Abrams has got to weigh this move. He may not get the nomination against her own future and her own ambitions. What happens if he fails? What happens if there are better candidates out there? Or what happens if she decides to run for president herself? It's got some upsides. The downsides, I think, make it a no for me.
Greg Carter? Greg Carter?
Yeah, I think about You know, I spent 17 years in Philadelphia, and another adopted son of that city, Allen Iverson, with his crossover dribble. He could freeze his defender. Joe Biden, this is what he got. This is what he does, right? You meet with Stacey Abrams. Now you've in the fence. You've frozen the critique for a moment. Don't pick her now. Pick her after the convention. But by inviting her into the conversation, because here's what's not going to happen. Two white people are not going to beat Donald Trump. Donald Trump has got everything going from the wall to ADOS to scaring people about people. No. So he's already got his fear piece. Stacey Abrams and Andrew Gillum are arguably the two rising stars of the Democratic Party. We know that more often governors are elected more often than people from the Senate. And as far as I'm concerned, most of the non-white people in this field so far, and this is early, of course, we know, are really auditioning for vice president. So if it's Kamala Harris as VP or Cory Booker as VP, that's strong. But I'm going to tell you, Stacey Abrams looks real good to me as a vice presidential pick. And all Biden has to do is float the idea now. And with that crossover, just hold everybody in freeze. And he can pick her this time next year or after the convention if he wins. But I'm telling you, if Abrams is the bottom of that ticket, it could be Biden. It can't be Warren. I don't think two women could do it. But I do think if it was O'Rourke or if it was Bernie Sanders, Stacey Abrams will bring black people out in her mid-40s because they think in 8 years from now, that's the president of the United States, brother.
Which is another reason not to lock it in right now.
Yeah, no, true.
I just feel like...
First of all, here's the first piece. Joe Biden got to decide if he's going to run.
True.
So, I mean, so all this other talk about who he might pick, at the end of the day, Joe, hurry the hell up. Time you get in the race, okay? Stop wasting time. All right, folks, I got to go to this story here because, look, first of all, Fox News does a very good job every night of delivering us unbelievable content on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Okay, we got a segment called Crazy as White Women, Crazy as White Men. And so we're just going to create a whole new segment, What the Hell They Said Now on Fox. So Laura Ingraham last night was interviewing John Woo, the lawyer in the George W. Bush administration who wrote the memos that justified torture. Okay, he tried to say that the Civil War cleaned up the racism in the United States Constitution. Y'all just play it.
The people who are criticizing the Electoral College, it's almost as if they forget the entire 19th century and the key moment in American history, the Civil War. If there was an original sin in creating the Electoral College and the Constitution, Abraham Lincoln and the North fought a war where 600,000 Americans died to end slavery and to correct the mistakes. 3 amendments were added to the Constitution after the Civil War and wiped out, I believe, anything that had to do with racism in the Constitution's original birth.
That's beautiful. Never forget that John Yoo was one of the people, along with Bush and Cheney and the rest of them, that were seriously being bandied about around the world for war crimes. One of these tortured kind of, so John, he's never had any legitimacy. And let's be very clear.
Folks, let me help y'all out. First of all, I just...
Hard to know where to begin.
13th, the 14th, and the 13th, 14th, the 15th Amendment wiped out the racism that was in the United States Constitution. Does he recall what took place with the Dred Scott decision? Now, that took place before the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, but it still was there. I also find it interesting that he mentioned those 3 specific amendments, because what John did not admit last night, and isn't Laura Ingraham an attorney? She should know. I mean, I'm not, but she should know this because there was a there was a Supreme Court case in 1883. 5 separate decisions that dealt with this very issue that actually rendered those 3 amendments unconstitutional. The Supreme Court actually decided in those cases, and they were called the civil rights cases, and said that it was unconstitutional because Congress, lacked the authority to regulate private affairs under the 14th Amendment. And not only that, those cases in 1883 invalidated the Civil Rights Act of 1875, which was the last Civil Rights Act that was passed until 1957. And so how could they somehow, and in fact, we could even go to the next decade, Plessy versus Ferguson. That's right. Racism was still there in the Constitution. See, here's the game they play. Oh, it erased racism in the Constitution. No. But it did not erase the racist who decides what the Constitution says. And so it was the Supreme Court, Plessy versus Ferguson, in 1883. It was the Supreme Court that did not even fix many of these issues until 1937. When you talk about, again, the covenants, that did not come until after the 1900s as well. Brown versus Board of Education, 1954. Wainwright. I mean, we can go down the line, all of these judicial cases that were decided in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And so the racism was still there in the Constitution because the very individuals who were enforcing the laws used the Constitution to pass those laws. In fact, that Supreme Court in 1883 actually said Congress did not have the authority to outlaw segregation.
No, that's exactly right.
That same Supreme Court.
No.
So, John Yoo, sit your ass down. Laura Ingraham, shut up. Because what they're trying to do, they are trying to tell the white folks who watch Fox, all these things were fixed because of the Civil War. As if the 92 years after the Great Compromise of 1877 somehow did not happen. It did, because if it was fixed with the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment, there would have been no need for the 1957 Civil Rights Act, or the 1960 Civil Rights Act, or 1964, or 65, or 68, or any of these decisions. Remember, it was Brown 1 and Brown 2. So, John Yoo, I don't know what law school you went to. Maybe it was Trump University, but seriously, enough with the revisionist history. Because guess what? People like Greg and Kelly and Joseph and myself, we are the reason white folks did not want black folks to know how to read. Mm-hmm. Because we could tell folks like you, who are Asian, who, by the way, would not have been accepted in America at the same time we were. Learn how to read history, not his story. All right, y'all. I got to go ahead and end it on this one. Great movie coming out this weekend. Last night, did y'all got the photo? Show the photo, please. Last night, Howard University. Jordan Peele, Lupita Nyong'o, they were at Howard University, Greg, your campus, showing his new horror flick. That's the photo selfie we took last night. It is expected to earn about $40 million this weekend. Here is an interview with Lupita Nyong'o.
We meet a family, the Wilsons, and the mother, Adelaide, is riddled with this trauma from her childhood that she cannot explain or shake off. And she's convinced, as they're on their way to their summer home in Santa Cruz, that something bad is going to happen.
I feel like it means like she's getting closer.
Who? The mirror girl?
You don't believe me?
I do. I do. I'm processing, okay?
And she's proven right when at the end of the day, these four shadowy figures show up at the top of their driveway and their worst nightmare ensues.
Hey! 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 Hey!
Well, I play Adelaide, who is the mom. She's an all-American mom, kind of a trophy wife even. And she is, you know, she's the primary one that we experience this story through. And because of that foreboding sense that something is coming for her, she's, you know, she's on her toes. And Red, who is her doppelganger, her shadow, is coming for her. I can't say anything else without spoiling it.
All right, Us again in theaters this weekend. I quickly want to go to my panel here. Kelly, they were, first of all, to the folks in the studio, y'all do me a favor. Go to Twitter, pull up the feed of Howard University. They have some video. They got the student swag surface. I want y'all to show some of that while we're talking. Kelly, black horror film, I mean, Jordan Peele, he is killing the game.
I mean, to the point where I'm afraid to go see the movie, specifically by myself. I need an entire therapy team and friends, family, and some wine in order to see this movie. But of course, you have to support Jordan Peele's career because it's just absolutely remarkable what he's doing. He's not only changing the game, he's rewriting the entire template as to what horror and suspense is supposed to be. So I'm excited, but I'm scared. I'm not going to lie. I am terrified to see this movie.
Joseph, first of all, I think what's awesome about this is, again, here's Jordan Peele, who folks know from the comedy show on Comedy Central, who is just changing the game, and not just even with horror. He was the one who made it possible for Spike Lee to do Black Klansman, and Spike said, I wouldn't be in this position if it wasn't for Jordan Peele.
They're opening doors for each other. Spike opened the door for Jordan. Jordan opened another one for Spike. And what's interesting about this film and what's remarkable about it is the fact that it is normalizing the black experience. Black people get to be in horror situations just like the white people do. And he's redefining something and groundbreaking with a combination of humor, the black experience, and horror. And it works on so many levels, at least Get Out did when I saw it, and I expect the same thing from this film. And he also deliberately gave a shout-out to HBCU and had his main character dress in Howard gear just for this occasion.
And again, Greg, that's a great point there. You saw the pull-up selfie. They presented the three of them with Howard University sweatshirts last night, and he said it was just sort of organic how it happened. And so here is a black director, a black writer who is changing the game and making it perfectly clear. You know what? I'm going to put us at the center. And he said last night to the students, and guess what? This is a horror film where black people live to the end.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because, I mean, I would put us in the long arc of black horror films. Think about films from the 1970s like Blackula, featuring, of course, one of the great classically trained actors, William Marshall, and then the one with Pam Grier as a Vodun priestess, Scream, Blackula, Scream. So this is not like the first, like Abby. Remember the zombie movie, Abby? And we can come forward. So I hope that Brother Peele, I expect, is going to do well. I'm not scared to go see it because, quite frankly, I think Get Out was a little overrated as far as I'm concerned. So we'll see how he does on his sophomore. Oh yeah, absolutely. Kind of a thin plaque.
Greg. Okay, Greg, you can get your ass whipped on that one.
Well, that's all right because I'm not scared because I'm a black man in America, which means my horror show starts in the morning and ends at night every day. So we'll see. But I do expect it's going to be well. And I know the Howard kids love it because they're dressed in Howard gear. So of course.
I'm not. Horror movies mean nothing to me, frankly. I see them as comedies, so I laugh through most of them. So yeah, they do nothing for me, but I'm definitely gonna go see it. Of course, when Get Out came out, I was so busy, and then Jordan actually sent me a direct message saying, Roland, have you seen the movie? And I was like, I haven't. He's like, okay, I need to get your opinion on the movie. I was like, okay, chill, man, I'm gonna go see the damn movie. And so I told him last night, I ain't gonna wait 3 weeks this time to go see the movie. I'm gonna go see it this weekend. So I want all of y'all to go see Us. Look, the first weekend is the most important movie. Let's make Us the #1 film in the country. Let's support what Jordan Peele is doing because he's writing some great stories. I want to thank Kelly, Joseph, and Greg. Our panel has been on the show today. Of course, I'm broadcasting live from Fort Lauderdale. Tomorrow, I'll be speaking to the black educators here. I want to get the name right. Of course, BAPSI, their educational conference, and it's going to be taking place at Dillard High School. And so I'm going to be speaking at 8 o'clock tomorrow. It's the Black Alliance of Black School Educators. So I'll be speaking tomorrow morning, and so looking forward to that. Hopefully the Wi-Fi is good. I'm going to try to live stream the speech. Also, Melody Campbell's group, the Black Women's Roundtable, is releasing their new report. We're going to be live streaming that from 9:30 to 10:30 a.m. Eastern as well. Why am I saying all of that? Because the reality is this, folks. nobody else is doing what we are doing. Not only are we doing a daily show right here with Roland Martin Unfiltered, we also have our one-on-one interviews. We have Lisa Ray is going to be tomorrow after we finish our show at 7 p.m. And then we also, of course, have the live events that we cover. We are covering what's happening in our community. There's a lot of people out there who are talking about, they cover this and cover that. But there's a lot of people, y'all, who are sitting behind microphones, not out here actually covering the news, bringing on guests, talking about the stuff that matters to us, which is why I need you to support what we do. You can support us right there by giving on the YouTube chat room, or you can go to Roland Martin Unfiltered. You can give via Cash App, Square. You can also give via PayPal as well. You can give monthly, you can give quarterly, you can give one-time payment. Every dollar goes to support the show. So, for instance, next week, we're going to be in Los Angeles, NAACP Image Awards, 50th anniversary. We'll be broadcasting, Red Carpet Friday and Saturday as well. And so we got we got all kinds of stuff that we're doing. We need your help to make it happen. I would love to get 100 of you signing up between now and tomorrow. And of course, at the end of the show tomorrow, we'll also run the video of all of our donors to our Bring the Funk fan club. So please, let's make this thing happen. $5, 50, 100, 500, doesn't matter. Every dollar counts. And so I shall see you guys tomorrow. Want y'all to have an absolutely great day. Share this video. Tell folks to watch it. I got to go. Holla! You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered, the blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.